we're starting off the list with the discovery of unbelievable galaxies. These galaxies are nearly the size of the Milky Way, which scientists weren't expecting to see. So why is this? In these deep field images from the telescope, huge galaxies were observed, filled with mature red stars. They look like tiny reddish dots to the powerful telescope, and they came about at the beginning of time, about 500 to 700 million years after the Big Bang. So astronomers anticipated seeing young and small galaxies in the early universe, but the James Webb observations revealed massive galaxies with old red stars, very different from what they'd expected to see and very different from what the predecessor, the Hubble Space Telescope, observed. Joel Leah, an astronomy and astrophysics assistant professor at Penn State, explained that the galaxies appeared 50 times more massive than expected, with some reaching the mass of our Milky Way when the universe was only 3% of its current age. Next up, we have the discovery of jumbos. In 2023, the James Webb Space Telescope discovered over 500 rogue planets, meaning they don't orbit a star, in the Orion Nebula. Now, researchers have detected mysterious radio signals from a pair of these rogue planets. These planets are known as Jupiter Mass Binary Objects, or jumbos, which I'm going to call for the duration of this point. James Webb, with its ability to pick up infrared radiation, revealed that about 80 of these rogue planets exist in pairs, dancing around each other at distances ranging from 25 to 400 times the distance from Earth to the Sun. Scientists don't really know what to make of these things right now. In fact, they're not even sure if jumbos are planets or entirely new entities, larger than planets but smaller than brown dwarfs. So this is already strange, but it's going to bring us to our next mystery. And that is the mysterious radio signals these jumbos were giving off. So in order to understand these strange objects, researchers wanted to see if they emitted radio waves, as different cosmic objects produce unique radio emissions. They looked through archives of observations made by the U.S. National Radio Astronomy Observatory and found that one pair, Jumbo 24, did emit radio waves. This jumbo pair is the heaviest and has the closest spacing between its two planets. The data showed that the radio waves from Jumbo 24 were steady and strong, with a power equivalent to 1/4 of a ton of TNT and frequencies of 6 to 8 gigahertz. But there was something very strange going on. The signals lacked circular polarization, which is the presence of magnetic fields, which you typically have with planets. The radio signals from Jumbo 24 were a bit unusual. They didn't match the patterns you'd normally expect from planets, brown dwarfs, or pulsars. The researchers considered the possibility of signals coming from an object behind Jumbo 24, but said that was highly unlikely. So they're doing more research into this, but as of right now, it's still a complete mystery. One of the biggest questions everyone has on their mind about space is, of course, is there life out there other than our own? It's one of the main reasons we want to explore it so badly, after all. Well, the discovery of a very interesting planet called K218b, we may have come closer than ever to answering that very question. The telescope found certain molecules in this planet's atmosphere that could indicate conditions suitable for life. K218b is an exoplanet located in the constellation Leo, about 120 light years away from our solar system. It was discovered in 2019, and ever since, astronomers have been pretty excited about it because of the signs of water vapor in its atmosphere. So this planet was always going to be a point of focus for James Webb. The telescope detected carbon-bearing molecules like methane and carbon dioxide in the planet's atmosphere. This means K218b may have a hydrogen-rich atmosphere and a surface covered by water, meaning there could very well be life. One of the coolest things the telescope spotted was a molecule called dimethyl sulfide, or DMS. On Earth, DMS is produced by life, specifically by microscopic organisms like phytoplankton. Now, scientists aren't 100% sure if they really detected DMS in the planet's atmosphere, but there's a chance, and that's pretty cool if it turns out to be the case. Next, let's talk about a terrifying planet that the James Webb Telescope spotted in 2023, VHS 1256b. This planet seems like Tatooine from Star Wars or Arrakis from Dune, except far worse. If you think sand is the worst and just gets everywhere, try living on VHS 1256b. This planet seems like absolute hell, caught in a never-ending sandstorm. But there are signs it has some similarities to Earth. The atmosphere shows signs of water, methane, carbon monoxide, and carbon dioxide. So there's a chance it could also host life. But aliens that live in a perpetual blistering hot sandstorm may not be the types of creatures we'd want to meet. Seems like they'd probably be a little frustrated. There's that classic saying, the more you know, the less you know. Well, if the James Webb Telescope has proven anything, it's how true that saying really is. It's now found discrepancies with how scientists used to measure the Hubble constant. So, first of all, what is the Hubble constant? This refers to how fast galaxies are moving away from us. Imagine the universe as a balloon that's just constantly expanding, and the Hubble constant is the rate at which the balloon is getting bigger. The faster the galaxies are moving away, the higher the Hubble constant. It helps astronomers understand the age and future of the universe, but the rate at which the universe is expanding has never been 100% solved, so scientists figured the James Webb Telescope would be able to shine some light on it, but apparently it revealed more questions than answers. So most models suggest the Hubble constant should be around 68 kilometers per second per megaparsec. 1 megaparsec is about 3.26 million light years. Not something I can really wrap my head around, because I and likely you don't really have any relatable reference for that, but the point is, some experts are now calculating the constant to be 69.8 kilometers per second per megaparsec. Others are giving even higher values. So there are questions about the accuracy of our measurements, and definitely some gaps in our understanding of the universe.
Number 7. Mars is the only other habitable planet. It's been said that Mars is the only other habitable planet, but that's not true. Kepler 186f is the first rocky exoplanet to be found within the habitable zone, as the region around the host star has the temperature that is right for liquid water. This planet is also very close in size to Earth. While planets have previously been found in the habitable zone, they are at least 40% larger in size than Earth, and understanding their makeup is challenging. Kepler 186f is more reminiscent of Earth. Although the size of Kepler 186f is known, its mass and composition are not. Previous research, however, suggests that a planet the size of Kepler 186f is likely to be rocky. Even though we may not find out about what's going on at the surface of this planet anytime soon, it's a strong reminder of why new technologies are being developed that will enable scientists to get a closer look at distant worlds, but we still have a lot to learn. So maybe one day the human race will be living on Kepler 186f. Number 6. Your rocket won't blow up before leaving Earth. Yeah, your rocket can actually explode before you even leave Earth. For example, Elon Musk's plan to go to Mars involves strapping a giant spaceship atop the biggest rocket that humanity has ever built. Because any rocket launch basically involves a long, controlled explosion, no matter how many safety tests are done beforehand, there is always a risk. If anything goes wrong, if the explosion gets out of control, the people strapped in that big container of fuel don't stand a chance. For context, NASA's Space Shuttle program carried 833 passengers between 1981 and 2011. Of those, 14 people died in explosions and 2 high-profile accidents, a fatality rate of 1.6%. That's more dangerous than driving, and it's even a bit riskier than climbing Mount Everest. Some of SpaceX's smaller Falcon 9 rockets have either exploded on the launch pad or blown up mid-flight as well, so safe to say getting to space is just as dangerous as being there. Number 5. Extended space travel doesn't affect DNA. It's not true. Astronaut Scott Kelly, who spent a year at the International Space Station in 2016, returned to find out that he was 2 inches taller than his departing height. The new physical differences between Scott and his identical twin brother, Mike, also an astronaut, were startling. Scientists compared the DNA of the two and found that besides growing 2 inches, Scott's gut bacteria were completely different and his gene expression had changed. changed. Scientists concluded that the changes were caused by the stresses of space travel, which can cause changes in a cell's biological pathways. Although Scott eventually returned to his original height, his other genetic changes are seemingly irreversible, meaning Scott and his brother are no longer identical twins, which is insane. Number 4. You can only see the Great Wall of China from space. It's been said that the only man-made structure you can see from space is the Great Wall of China, but the visible wall theory was shaken after China's own astronaut, Yang Lui, said he couldn't see the historic structure. There was even talk about rewriting textbooks that supported the theory, a formidable task in Earth's most populous nation. The issue surfaced again after photos taken by Leroy Chiao from the International Space Station were determined to show small sections of the wall in Inner Mongolia about 200 miles north of Beijing. A photo was taken of it, but it wasn't the only thing seen. For years it's been said that the Great Wall of China is the only structure to be seen from space, but that isn't true. From the ISS about 250 miles up, you can see the Great Wall along with numerous other man-made structures, but it's definitely not the most visible imprint of man on our planet. Number 3. Space isn't dangerous. We all know that accidents happen and things can go wrong, but it seems like NASA never told their astronauts how bad things could get. Astronaut Scott Perinsky had to install a new module on the ISS that would serve as a node for the addition of future research laboratories. Part of the mission required changing the location of an array of solar panels. Things were going along really well until the crew inside commanded these large solar panels to extend. They got jammed up and the panels began to tear. It was unsafe to continue to extend this panel any further, and you couldn't retract it either. There was concern that if the astronauts even tried to undock the space shuttle, it might rip apart and hit the shuttle. After 72 hours of grueling work on the ground, NASA came up with a plan. Scott would have to travel further away from safety of an airlock than had ever been previously attempted. It wasn't only the distance that was nerve-wracking, as Scott explained, there was a real danger that we could do even worse damage to the space station. Then there was the potential risk to myself, because if there was any metal-to-metal connection with the solar panel or arcing, it could actually electrocute me or cause ignition in the 100% oxygen in my suit. All the tools I was working with had to be specially insulated. The metal parts of my spacesuit had to be wrapped in special tape, he said. Thankfully, everything worked out and the mission was a success. Scott has said, "I still to this day think it's one of NASA's greatest accomplishments, but it's crazy that he had to go through that." Number 2. There's no life on the moon. When astronaut Neil Armstrong took a walk on the moon and became the first man to do so in 1969, many conspiracy theories came to light. For one, people claimed he didn't actually go to the moon and that the footage was recorded in a studio. Of the many conspiracy theories surrounding this moment, there's one that remains a mystery to date. During the Apollo 11 mission, after Neil landed on the moon, NASA claims to have lost transmission for roughly 2 minutes. And in a reportedly secret message to NASA, Neil said, "These babies were huge, sir. Enormous. Oh god, you wouldn't believe it. I'm telling you, there are other spacecrafts out here lined up on the far side of the crater's edge. They're on the moon watching us." Yep. Seems like Neil encountered some aliens, and I'm sure they never prepared him for that. And coming in at number 1 is the effects space has on you emotionally. Being in space is scary. Your safety is at risk both physically and emotionally. Astronaut Chris Hadfield said sometimes we hear pings as tiny rocks hit our spaceship, and also the creaks and snaps of expanding metal as we go in and out of sunlight. The solar panels are full with tiny holes from the micrometeorites. I watched a large meteorite burn up between me and Australia, and to think that the hypersonic dumb lump of rock randomly hurtling into us instead sent a shiver up my back. Besides that, going to space can cause a lot of psychological issues like anxiety or depression. When actor William Shatner went up to space, he said this of his experience: "Everything I had thought was wrong. Everything I had expected to see was wrong. I had thought that going into space would be the ultimate catharsis of that connection I had been looking for between all living things, that being up there would be the next beautiful step to understanding the harmony of the universe. I discovered that the beauty isn't out there, it's down here with all of us. Leaving that behind made my connection to our tiny planet even more profound. It was among the strongest feelings of grief I have ever encountered encountered. The contrast between the vicious coldness of space and the warm nurturing of Earth below me filled with overwhelming sadness. I learned later that I was not alone in this feeling. It is called the overview effect and is not uncommon among astronauts, including Yuri Gagarin, Michael Collins, Sally Ride, and many others. Essentially, when someone travels to space and views Earth from orbit, a sense of the planet's fragility takes hold. I cannot imagine the feelings of experiencing this, and it honestly sounds traumatizing.
Starting us off at number 10, the faces of Mars. There are many things I could guess you might find in space. Space junk, satellites, maybe even an alien if you're lucky, but the last thing I would probably guess would be a human face on the surface of the red planet. Well, back in 1976, while circling Mars in search of landing sites for its sister ship, the Viking 1, the Viking 1 snapped a few photos that were intended for NASA engineers to study. Now, the strange thing about this photo is obvious. It appears as though there is a human face-shaped object on the surface of another planet, which I mean, just brings up so many questions. Now, as far as NASA has officially announced, it's nothing too exciting, just merely a huge rock formation which resembles a human head formed by shadows, giving the illusion of eyes, nose, and mouth. However, this hasn't deterred conspiracy theorists from getting their 2 cents in, and some believe that it could be all a huge cover-up for some kind of alien life on Mars. More specifically, the theory states that the face is the remnant of an alien civilization, while also suggesting that other rock formations in the area could be a crumbling extraterrestrial city. Almost like some kind of alien Atlantis, which not only would make a very cool sci-fi movie, but would be a mind-blowing cover-up if it turned out to be true. Next up at number 9, zombie stars. So I'll be the first to say I know this is a bit of a stretch to call this a creature, but there's no denying it's a wild situation that feels like it shouldn't be real. Back in 2014, NASA announced it had discovered a star system that had been the victim of a fairly weak supernova explosion they referred to as SN2012Z. Now, boring scientific name aside, normally when a star supernovas, that's kind of it. But in the case of the zombie stars, scientists found that a part of the system's dwarf star may have somehow survived, kind of like the undead. And while they haven't officially confirmed anything just yet, that only makes it all the more suspicious. However, that's not even the wildest part. Apparently, another reason they're called zombie stars is that they scream as they eat other stars. As NASA explained, several seemingly dead stars are emitting high-energy X-rays that could well be their howls or screams, which is just about the weirdest thing I have ever learned about. Coming in at number 8, animals. Prior to the time that people were being sent up into orbit, scientists still had many curiosities about what it would be like for a living organism to leave the Earth's atmosphere. Now, of course, they wanted to test these theories in the safest way they could imagine at the time, which left really only one option: animals. Both the United States and the Russian space station began testing by sending out various animals like monkeys, chimps, and dogs into space in order to analyze the effects it would have. Now, while on one hand there is quite a bit of groundwork laid for people to be able to make it up into space, not all of these launches were what one might call a success, in that several of the animals who were shot up into space did not come back down, either dying due to complications in the spacecraft or from pure panic. Reportedly, these animal corpses float out there to this day and can be seen by astronauts making trips to space, which is not only super sad, but it's kind of creepy too. I mean, just imagine seeing the corpse of a dog floating around in the infinite black backdrop of space. So while NASA is obviously not hiding that they did this, they are definitely not trying to remind you that they have accidentally killed animals and left them for eternity in the void of space.
Next up, we have dust. Apparently this stuff is inescapable and has been around a lot longer than we once thought. And if that's not scary, I don't know what else is. Scientists using the James Webb peered into the past and found carbon dust in 10 different galaxies that existed just 1 billion years after the Big Bang. Now, this may not seem all that crazy, But this is actually kind of a big deal. You see, what scientists have always thought is that heavy elements like carbon were created in the hearts of stars. When these stars exploded, they scattered these elements as interstellar dust. Then new stars formed from this dust, making galaxies richer in heavy elements. But the JWST found this carbon dust in galaxies that are only about 10 million years old. That's way faster than their previous theories predicted for the buildup of heavy elements in galaxies. So the question is, how did these young galaxies get so rich in carbon so quickly? So, almost every large galaxy has one thing in common, a supermassive black hole at the center. But what came first, the black hole or the galaxy? Well, scientists once thought supermassive black holes only showed up later in the universe's timeline, after the first stars and galaxies formed. But surprise, the JWST data hints that these colossal black holes might have been around during the first 50 million years after the Big Bang. In the grand scheme of things, that's very, very early, basically the dawn of time. The team leader, Joseph Silk, explained that these early black holes could have acted like, quote, building blocks or seeds for the galaxies we see today. Instead of forming after the stars, they might have been there from the beginning, influencing star formation. So, the plot thickens. And black holes were already incredibly mysterious before. We really gotta remind ourselves how incredible this planet is. Everything is set up perfectly for life to grow and flourish, unlike 55 Cancri E, which has sent out mysterious signals for almost 2 decades, but the mystery of these signals may have been solved. So this rocky world was discovered in 2004. It's around 8 times the size of Earth and sits about 40 light years away. The exoplanet's been emitting strange signals for almost 2 decades. A recent study suggests that volcanoes on 55 Cancri E might be causing these signals. Periodically, these volcanoes open up and spew out hot gas, forming a temporary atmosphere around the planet, but the extreme heat near its parent star causes this atmosphere to burn off, leaving the planet exposed again until the next outburst. And the mystery is the signals observed when the planet moves in front or behind its parent star, creating a sort of eclipse. Sometimes when it goes behind the star, there's no visible light coming from the planet. Other times, a strong visible light signal is emitted. This is because the planet's proximity to its star triggers outgassing. Giant volcanoes and thermal vents open up, releasing hot carbon-rich elements into the atmosphere. The problem is the planet can't hang on to this atmosphere for long because of the intense heat. It gets blown away, leaving the planet bare until the next outgassing event. So sometimes the planet has an atmosphere, and other times it doesn't, which is pretty odd. And finally, we have the discovery of the oldest known supermassive black hole in the universe. This black hole is luckily extremely far away, 13.2 billion light years away from Earth, to be exact. This also means we're observing it as it was about 470 million years after the Big Bang. I still find it nuts how these telescopes are basically looking back in time. This black hole is in a galaxy named UHZ1, and this black hole is believed to be born massive, with an estimated mass between 10 and 100 million times our Sun. The discovery of this thing has astronomers wondering even more about how supermassive black holes form. Did they emerge from the collapse of massive gas clouds, or from explosions of the first stars? Apparently this one was massive from the start, meaning it could have formed differently than how other black holes are thought to form, slowly growing and expanding over time as they consume more matter. This one could have had a head start, expanding much faster than what the modeling used to suggest. So basically, that is to say, from every point on this list, we just don't know really what's going on up there in space. And that's kind of the fear of unknown. is like the biggest fear humans can have, right?
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have PSR B0943+10. Pulsars are rotating neutron stars emitting regular pulses of radiation, and they have long captivated astronomers with their very precise cosmic metronomes. But in 2011, a particularly eccentric pulsar, the one I just named, challenged established understanding and left scientists scratching their heads. Located approximately 3,000 light years away, this is no ordinary pulsar. Instead of maintaining a steady, predictable pattern of radiation, it displays a very perplexing behavior. Without warning, it spontaneously switches between emitting radio waves and X-ray emissions. This erratic mood swing bewilders scientists. Standard models of pulsar behavior were based on the idea that radio wave and X-ray emissions were tied to different periods in a pulsar's life, not that a pulsar could switch between them at will. PSR B0943+10's unpredictable switches happening over mere seconds shatters this belief. Despite being discovered in the 60s, it wasn't until 2011 that this pulsar's unusual trait was detected, demonstrating that even familiar celestial bodies can surprise us. This pulsar's peculiar behavior provides a very unique window into neutron star physics, challenging our knowledge and understanding of these celestial lighthouses. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Galactic Center radio signal. In 2013, astronomers turned their attention closer to home, or more accurately our galactic home, the Milky Way. Detected by the NuSTAR Space Telescope, an unexplained signal emanated from the center of our galaxy, a region dominated by the gravitational behemoth, the supermassive black hole Sagittarius A. This unusual signal, detected in the radio wave spectrum, posed several intriguing questions. Was it perhaps a signal from a previously undiscovered celestial body, or some unforeseen interaction of known cosmic objects? Or could it be an indication of dark matter, the elusive substance that makes up about 85% of the universe's mass? While the nature and source of this galactic center radio signal remain undetermined, it underscores the cosmic riddles that surround us, even in our own galactic backyard. Whether we're probing the distant reaches of our universe or exploring our own galaxy's heart, these celestial signals remind us that our universe continues to be a grand puzzle, offering more questions than answers. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Orphan Afterglow. In the cosmic theater, the year 2019 marked a peculiar detection that challenged the norm. Astronomers using the Chandra X-ray Observatory observed a unique phenomenon, an X-ray burst that was strikingly alone, without its usual precursor, a gamma-ray burst. The cosmic enigma was dubbed an Orphan Afterglow. Typically, gamma-ray bursts, the most energetic explosions in the universe, precede X-ray bursts. These gamma-ray events often indicate the birth of a black hole or a neutron star, and the subsequent X-ray afterglow is the lingering echo of this cataclysmic event. However, the Orphan Afterglow seemed to defy this established pattern. The solitary X-ray burst appeared without a detectable gamma-ray burst, sparking curiosity and speculation among the scientific community. What could have caused such an event? Was it merely that the gamma-ray burst was directed away from Earth, or were there alternative processes at play?
Coming in at number 7, Arous Supervoid. So again, this might be a slight stretch to call this a creature, but even so, it's a pretty terrifying space situation. The Arous Supervoid is an extremely large and eternally empty chunk of, well, space that, from what scientists can tell, is around 1 billion light years in diameter. For reference, 1 light year is supposed to be about 9 trillion kilometers, or 6 trillion miles. So times 9 trillion by 1 billion, and that's how big this giant supervoid is. Now, as far as astronomical standards go, that's a hefty size. And this supervoid is so large that so far it can't be explained by the current theories of the universe, which is pretty unnerving in a few ways. The most straightforward theory about the supervoid suggests the existence of an insanely massive black hole that would have the power to suck in stars, planets, light, and dark matter, among other space stuff, and that with each inhale of the universe it will get stronger and stronger, all of which sounds horrifying. on. But that's not the only theory. Some researchers propose the void is actually evidence of a parallel universe, maybe even one being controlled by a horde of ruthless aliens. Of course, the second theory requires some more concrete evidence, but aliens or not, this super void still seems pretty freaky. Coming in at number 6, a mysterious black creature. So this one wasn't actually seen in space, but as far as witnesses are concerned, it is definitely alien-like, and it definitely comes with some questions. Spotted in March of 2019, a passenger on a commercial flight from Phoenix to Portland captured what appears to be 2 long dark objects with long tails or tentacles, I don't know, whatever you want to call them, floating in the sky. Now, at first glance, I will say it's kind of giving off Dementor vibes. However, some viewers have also compared it with the squiddy sentinels from the Matrix series. And I mean, either of those options are not really great if you ask me. Now, as far as I could find, NASA hasn't come forward to explain anything in the video, nor have they tried to deny what the masses are assuming, that it's some alien that came down from space to ruin humanity. So could they be hiding something? I don't know. You tell me what you think down below. Coming in at number 5, an alien. Of all the creatures to see, the one that everyone wants to hear about is an actual alien. Because, well, of course. And speaking of, back in 2018, Leland Melvin, former NFL player and astronaut, had a Twitter exchange with a self-proclaimed UFO researcher, Scott C. Waring, that shocked everyone and left us with more questions than answers. It all started when Melvin replied to a post by Scott Waring, and according to Melvin, while in space he witnessed a quote organic alien-like creature that was translucent and curved while he was in the bay of the space shuttle Atlantis, which was orbiting Earth. Immediately after noticing this creature, he says he and his fellow astronauts reported the sighting to NASA, but the agency told them that what they saw was likely just some ice that had broken off from the shuttle, and that it was the movement of the floating shards that caught their eye. Now, of course, the UFO researcher jumped to the conclusion that NASA was covering up something, to which Melvin replied, quote, I don't think so, but you never know. I mean, it's intriguing, you have to admit. What do you think? Was NASA trying to hide something? Coming in at number 4, aliens in their spaceships. There's no denying that when it comes to astronauts, Neil Armstrong is probably the most well-known out there. I mean, being the first person to walk on the moon and all. But of course, with that infamous trip came a few conspiracy theories that still run rampant to this day. But of the many conspiracy theories surrounding this moment, the most intriguing is that Neil witnessed actual alien spaceships during his historic moon landing. Allegedly, while on the Apollo 11 mission in 1969, after Armstrong landed on the moon, NASA claims to have lost transmission for roughly 2 minutes. However, during those 2 minutes, reportedly a secret message was sent to NASA in which Neil said, "These babies were huge, sir. Enormous. Oh God, you wouldn't believe it. I'm telling you, there are other spacecrafts out there, lined up on the far side of the crater's edge. They're on the moon watching us." Now, of course, no one from NASA has confirmed this, nor did Neil while he was alive, but it would definitely be wild if it turned out to be true. Coming in at number 3, an alien stalker. Back in April of 1979, Viktor Afanasyev lifted off and began making his way to the Salyut 6 space station. However, while he was making his way there, he claims to have witnessed a very strange sight. Quote, "It followed us during half of our orbit. We observed it on the light side, and when we entered the shadow side, it disappeared completely. It was an engineering structure made from some type of metal, approximately 40 meters long with inner hulls. The object was narrow here and wider here, and inside there were openings. Some places had projections like small wings. The object stayed very close to us. We photographed it, and our photos showed it to be 23 to 28 meters away." Now, that in and of itself is a little suspicious, but Victor also claims to have continually reported back to Mission Control about its size, shape, and position. But when the cosmonaut returned to Earth, he was allegedly debriefed and ordered not to talk to anyone about it ever. And to make matters even stranger, he claims his cameras were confiscated and his photos and his voice transmissions from space have never been released. I mean, that definitely sounds like someone is hiding something, if you ask me. Next up at number 2, a green orb. During his career, astronaut, aerospace engineer, and pilot, Gordon Cooper was not terribly shy about his belief in extraterrestrials. In 1951, while on an Air Force mission, Cooper claims to have seen metallic flying saucers that could allegedly outmaneuver any American spacecraft. Quote, "I believe these extraterrestrials and their crews are visiting the planet, and that, quote, most astronauts are reluctant to discuss UFOs. But things got even more interesting in 1963. At the time, Cooper was piloting a 34-hour solo orbital mission, and near the end of his trip, Cooper claims that he witnessed a mysterious glowing green orb. The green entity was picked up by a tracking radar in Australia, and yet, bizarrely, when he landed, reporters from NPC told him they were barred from questioning him about the sighting at all. But that doesn't mean he hasn't spoken about the subject at other times. Quote, "In the USA, every day, our radar instruments capture objects of form and composition unknown to us, and there are thousands of witness reports and a quantity of documents to prove this, but nobody wants to make them public. Why? Because authority is afraid that people may think of God knows what kind of horrible invaders. We have to avoid panic by all means." And last up in our number 1 spot, space snakes. The astronaut in question is Dr. Story Musgraves, who is not only a decorated former astronaut, but also physician and consultant. And according to him, he witnessed a strange creature on 2 separate occasions while in space. Quote, "On 2 of my missions, and I still don't have an answer, I have seen a snake out there 6, 7, 8 feet long. It is rubbery because it has internal waves in it and it follows you for a rather long period of time. The more you fly in space, the more you see an incredible amount of things out there, and that sort of brings to you really a certainty that other living creatures are out there." Now, of course, many were skeptical of his space snake sighting, and theories like it being a hose or a piece of space debris have been used to discredit him, but Musgraves has never once wavered and insists on what he saw. Quote, "Other living creatures are out there, and other civilizations that have been around for a million years that are doing unimaginable kinds of things."
Number 10. Moon landing plans. We are trying to go to the moon again, but that might not happen for a while. Revised schedules in a leaked document showed that the agency is preparing for more inevitable delays, distinguishing between baseline dates and the schedule as it stands, a canned schedule that would prioritize regular launches, and a content program that would only launch when each component of each mission is ready. Under the content schedule, the Artemis 3 mission wouldn't launch until 2026, with a rover making its way to the lunar surface not before 2032, as opposed to the currently projected 2030. But there's one problem with launching the Gateway: the rocket configuration of the agency's Space Launch System, SLS, called Block 1B, is far from ready. In fact, just the tower it's building for the launch of this SLS iteration is already way over budget and behind schedule, just like the entire SLS program. Then there's SpaceX's Starship, also under contract with NASA to send astronauts to the lunar surface, which appears larger and more capable than the Gateway. Now, NASA is clearly still trying to establish the schedule of returning the first NASA astronauts to the moon since the early 1970s, and the dates are slipping fast. Number 9. Leaked video. A leaked Navy video captured in July 2019 showed a sphere-shaped unidentified object flying over water near San Diego. The footage, obtained by a documentary filmmaker and shared with NBC News, appeared to show the mysterious object flying for a few minutes before disappearing into the water. The video was captured by a Navy aircraft and recorded in the USS Amza Combat Information Center, according to the filmmaker Jeremy Corbell. The clip appears to show a spherical object flying above the water for a few minutes near San San Diego before it vanishes. It splashed, military personnel can be heard saying in the video. The Defense Department confirmed the clip was recorded by Navy personnel and said it would be reviewed by the Pentagon's Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, a panel established to gain insight into the nature and origins of such objects. Number 8. Multiple objects in the sky. Ryan Graves, a former Navy pilot who testified that he witnessed unidentified aerial phenomenon UAP with his own eyes, called on President Joe Biden to investigate the mysterious objects spotted in American airspace. Ryan, a former fighter pilot, explained that after 2014, when upgrades were made to our radar system, our squadron made a startling discovery. There were unknown objects in our airspace. And these were not just mere balloons like the Chinese spy balloon that dominated the country's attention in February. These were no mere balloons, they could hold their position, appearing motionless, despite Category 4 hurricane force winds of 120 knots. They did not have any visible means of lift or control surfaces, in other words, nothing that resembled normal aircraft with wings, flaps, or engines. These are not isolated incidents, Ryan said. We have a real UFO problem, and it's not balloons. The point is that we don't have a clear understanding of what's above our heads as we thought we did. There are uncertainties up there that we have to deal with, and if we don't do it, our adversaries are going to take advantage of that uncertainty, that weakness, to spy on us with various means, as we've seen. It's pretty clear if there are things over our head that we're not sure what they are, well, we need to figure it out. If they're adversarial, it's a national security issue, we have the mechanisms for that. If it's not a security issue and it's not an adversarial platform, then it's a matter of scientific inquiry. Now, it's crazy that he was even allowed to speak on this, and to be honest, it kinda makes me scared.
In our number 7 spot today, we have the Vel Pulsar Glitch. In the cosmos, even the most predictable celestial bodies can sometimes throw astronomers a bit of a curveball. This was the case in 2000 with the Vel Pulsar, a pulsar that, despite being one of the most observed and best studied, presented an unexpected event that left astronomers scratching their heads. The event, fittingly termed a glitch, saw the pulsar suddenly rotating faster than it usually did. Located about 1,000 light-years away in the Vela constellation, the Vel Pulsar is a type of neutron star that emits regular beams of electromagnetic radiation out into space. Since its discovery in 1968, it has become one of the most watched celestial objects due to its regularity, allowing scientists to predict its rotations with impressive accuracy. However, in 2000, this predictable rhythm was abruptly disrupted. The Vel Pulsar experienced an unexpected acceleration in its rotation. While this pulsar is known to quote-unquote glitch every 3 years or so, the 2000 event was noteworthy due to its scale. The sudden spin-up was larger and more dramatic than anything observed previously, leading to much speculation and study. This intriguing event challenged existing theories about pulsar glitches and their internal structure. Despite decades of observation, the Vel Pulsar reminded us that the universe still has countless mysteries to be unraveled. In our number 5 spot today, we have Tabbys Star. This star, which has also been referenced as the WTF star, is an F-type main sequence star which is located in the constellation Cygnus, about 1,470 light-years away from Earth. This star is of particular importance because of the fact that it shows unusual light shifts, which includes a 22% dimming in brightness. Basically, from our point of view, something continually blocks the star, and it likely isn't a planet, because a Jupiter-sized planet would only block about 1% of a star the size of this one. So what could it possibly be? There are a few theories out there surrounding this anomaly, but none are able to fully explain what is happening here. Some believe that it is some sort of uneven ring of dust orbiting the star, and others believe that the star's luminosity fluctuates depending on the efficiency of the heat being transported to its photosphere. These are just 2 of the theories surrounding this star, but there are many more out there, and at this point, we just don't know. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Black Widow Pulsar. Unveiling the drama of the cosmos, our universe revealed an intense astronomical spectacle in 1988. Astronomers detected a fascinating object, a pulsar known as the Black Widow Pulsar, or PSR B1957+20. Pulsars are neutron stars, remnants of supernova explosions characterized by emitting regular beams of radiation as they spin. However, the Black Widow Pulsar stands out from its kin due to a unique and somewhat macabre characteristic. Located approximately 6,500 light-years away away from Earth in the constellation of Sagittarius, this pulsar is locked in a destructive cosmic dance with its companion star. As they revolve around each other, the pulsar's intense gravitational pull and radiation are steadily vaporizing its unfortunate partner. The process resembles a venomous black widow spider consuming its mate, hence the name. The pulsar's companion, initially comparable in mass to our sun, is now merely a tenth of that, stripped away by the relentless energy of the black widow. The radiation emitted from this process is intense and rhythmic, like a cosmic lighthouse casting regular signals into the depths of space. Despite the seemingly predatory nature of the black widow pulsar, it provides astronomers with an exceptional opportunity to study the effects of extreme gravity and radiation on stellar bodies. This astronomical phenomenon encapsulates the sheer power, violence, and strange beauty of the universe, reminding us of the dynamic and often brutal processes at play in the cosmos. In our number 3 spot today, we have Hogs Object. Okay, so there are different shapes to galaxies. That's not the weirdest thing in the world. You know that we live in a spiral-shaped one. It's beautiful. There are other galaxies called ellipticals that are more like oval shapes, but one galaxy in particular, which is now called Hogs Object, is truly like none we've ever seen. Just realizing, how do we get a name like the Milky Way and then they get a name like Hogs Object? Just would be a horrible name for a galaxy. This galaxy has a yellow core, and this core is surrounded by an outer ring of blue stars that are much younger than the core, but in the middle between the two, there's just nothing, and researchers are completely stumped as to how it could have formed. The galaxy was first discovered in the 1950s, and since then, there is one leading theory as to how it could have been formed, but it still isn't concrete. Basically, the leading theory suggests that perhaps a small galaxy sped through a larger disc-shaped galaxy, which then created this bizarre situation. But the problem with this theory is that there are no signs of any nearby galaxies that could have served as the sort of bullet in this scenario. If that happened, it also would have sped up the core of Hogs Object, but we can observe it as moving quite slowly, so that also rules out this theory. There have been other galaxies discovered that have some similar characteristics to this one, but none share all the qualities seen in this very bizarre galaxy. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Mysterious Gap. A new analysis by scientists at MIT of ancient meteorites found something new and very interesting. In the early solar system, there was what is referred to as a protoplanetary disk of dust and gas that rotated around the sun, and eventually it coalesced into the planets that we all know and love today. So this new study and analysis suggests that a sort of mysterious gap existed within this disk somewhere around 4.567 billion years ago, and it was in an area near where the asteroid belt is today. The reason this gap is mysterious is because it isn't quite clear what the cause of this gap was. There are a few possibilities, including Jupiter, during the time when it began to take its shape. Because of its extremely large gravitational pull, it could have pushed gas and dust towards the outskirts, which then would leave a gap in the developing disk. There are other possibilities, but regardless of whatever caused this gap, it is said to have likely served as a cosmic boundary that kept material on either side from interacting with each other. And finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have shooting stars. Okay, so we often look to the night sky in an attempt to see a shooting star, and the chances might be pretty good depending on how light polluted the area is. I mean, either that or you're seeing one of the Starlink satellites, but either way, we know that shooting stars aren't really stars at all, and are instead meteors burning up as they quickly move through Earth's atmosphere. But what if I told you that there really are some shooting stars that are actually stars? Hypervelocity stars were discovered by astronomers in 2005, and it is thought that they occur or form when a binary star system, or a star system that has 2 stars, gets destroyed by a black hole. One of the stars in the system will usually fall into the black hole, which may just send the other one flying across space as fast as millions of miles per hour. It's definitely not the same thing that we think of when we think of shooting stars, but it definitely is quite the galactic event.
First on our list today, we have the South Atlantic Anomaly, also known as the Bermuda Triangle of space, which, much like its eponym counterpart, has been responsible for many strange happenings as well as dangerous circumstances within its parameters. Now, while the reasonings behind the many disappearances of ships and planes within the Bermuda Triangle remain highly debated but ultimately unknown, the dangerous terrain of space's version has recently adopted itself a scientific explanation, which I will share with you now. the best that I can. So basically surrounding Earth, there are two belts stacked on top of one another. The innermost is filled with high energy protons, and the outermost is made up of mainly electrons. These belts are held into place by Earth's magnetic field and play an extremely important role in protecting the Earth from particles shooting out from the surface of the sun, which can cause harmful radiation. Well, the thing is, at the point of the South Atlantic anomaly, the intensity of the magnetic field holding the belts in their place decreases, leaving an area of extreme vulnerability to satellites, spacecrafts, and any other equipment. Basically, anything that passes through the region will experience extreme radiation to the point of some serious damage. Okay, this one's not so much dark as it is exciting. I bet you thought that Mars was the most likely planet to inhabit life, other than Earth of course. But if you thought that, you'd be wrong. Or maybe you'd be right, as the most likely place in which life exists within our solar system outside of our own planet isn't actually a planet. It's a moon. More specifically, Europa, one of Jupiter's largest moons. While the presence of oceans beneath its icy surface have been confirmed, it is predicted by scientists and astronomers that deeper still, the moon contains geothermal vents, providing heat to the waters and possibly playing host to thousands of life forms. Some other cool things about Europa is that not only is it covered in oceans, but its waters act incredibly similarly to our own, producing 10 times more oxygen than hydrogen, which combined with all of the other factors in which we have just discussed, make the existence of life on this planet extremely scientifically promising. What do you guys think? Could this be the first case of real aliens coming to us in the form of single-celled organisms? And next on the list we have Lovejoy, the alcoholic comet that wanted a drink so bad it made its own. Not like at the bar, but it literally made its own alcohol, cosmically. Thought to be nothing more than just a regular comet glowing white hot, leaving behind a trail of space dust, Lovejoy has proved itself to be a whole lot more when in 2015 it decided to do a quick fly by the sun. When this happened, the 250-meter comet began doing something that had, until then, never been seen before. It began spewing alcohol at a rate that would satisfy an entire campus of frat houses. It is estimated that the comet released ethyl alcohol at a rate of 500 bottles of wine per second. Now this is already super cool, but it does get cooler, because all jokes aside, along with the ethyl alcohol, the comet also produced large amounts of sugar as well as organic molecules, which, when you mix them all together, are the building blocks of DNA. Another instance in which we are possibly witnessing the beginning stages of life beyond the barriers of our own earthly existence. Moving on from C2H5, the chemical formula for ethyl alcohol, we have CO2. Not ours though, as scientists have recently discovered a large presence of carbon dioxide as well as methane gas and water vapor outside of our own solar system surrounding K2-18b, an exoplanet that is 8.6 times the size of our Earth. So what makes this interesting? This is the first time CO2 has been discovered outside of our solar system. Just another indication that we really don't know all that much about what goes on within the vastness of space. The planet, as well as the presence of gases and liquids, was not technically discovered by a satellite, rather a space telescope orbiting the sun 1 million miles away from Earth. So close enough. This discovery not only shows how powerful this piece of technology is, but yet another possible life-bearing planet, as the presence of methane and CO2 and water are also all potential indications of such existence. At the halfway point, we are keeping it light with the discovery of Pluto's slug? A slug-shaped object making its way across the planet's icy surface known as the Sputnik planum. The surface, not the object, they just call that Pluto's slug. Okay, now that you're all caught up, it's time for me to break the news. What looks like a giant slug making its way through the tundras of Pluto's frozen wastelands has actually been determined to be nothing more than an iceberg. Well, kind of. Rather, it's a floating block of water sitting on top of and sliding its way through the denser solid nitrogen which surrounds it. Not scary, but pretty cool. And there's some pretty neat stuff going on in this area that has nothing to do with the so-called slug as well. You may notice in the photographs, Sputnik planum is covered in little bumps and ridges all across its surface, and that's because this particular area on Pluto is almost acting as a giant icy lava lamp. An oxymoron, I know, but hear me out. The ice on Pluto's surface is super nitrogen heavy, and Pluto's surface generates heat. That heat pushes the ice up, but when it cools, it sinks down to warm up again, up and down, thus creating the bumpy ridges that decorate the Planum plains. So that was cool, but let's get back on track because next up we have the Cosmic Keyhole, perhaps one of the most perplexing nebulas discovered to date. Beautiful, yes. Stunning, yes. Understandable, not at all. The Cosmic Keyhole is a reflection nebula, meaning it's part of debris left behind from the cataclysmic event of star formation. Like a cloud of dust surrounding a street lamp, reflection nebula are lit up by the bright star whose creation gave way to their existence. While reflection nebula are normal and common spectacles throughout countless galaxies, this one is strange, and you can probably guess why. It's the massive amount of empty space directly at its center. At first, scientists believed this to be a Bok globule, which is a freezing cold, dense cloud of gas, molecules, and cosmic dust that blocks out background light, but they have since realized that it's not the case. In fact, the keyhole is something entirely different. It's actually nothing at all. The dark patch observed is nothing more than a completely empty region of space, never seen before, unexplainable, and incredibly bizarre.
Number 7. ADAR. The Pentagon's new Office for Investigating Potential UFO Sightings received hundreds of new reports in 2022, and while it can explain more than half of those events, a sizable chunk remains a mystery. Within the new batch of sightings, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence say they're focusing on some 171 cases, including some in which objects appear to have demonstrated unusual flight characteristics or performance capabilities and require further analysis. Since it was formed last summer, the ADAR office has received 366 reports of unidentified aerial phenomena. That total reflects 247 new UAP reports and another 119 that occurred before March 2021, but hadn't been included in an earlier report. The new numbers indicate a step in a rise of UAP sightings. The report released in June 2021 listed just 144 reports, covering a 17-year period. With the subsequent additions, 510 UAP reports were in their files at the end of August 2022. Officials say they believe the rise in UAP reports is due to US government efforts to destigmatize the topic of UAP and instead recognize the potential risks the phenomenon poses, both as an aviation hazard and potential adversarial activity such as foreign surveillance efforts. Number 6. Secret Space Station. Back when the NASA space program was all over the news in the 60s, the USAF was simultaneously working on a more covert program. The Manned Orbiting Laboratory was a top-secret United States Air Force initiative, with the main objective being to serve as a manned satellite to spy against the Soviet Union. The shuttle never officially launched and the program was shut down in 1969. However, thanks to declassified documents, we can see how the government intended to keep a watchful eye over the Soviet Union. Number 5. Trump's tweet. Okay, this is kind of funny, but let me explain. There are thousands of satellites in Earth's orbit right now, and hundreds are operated by the United States military. While the public has known of their presence for years, the actual capabilities of our spy satellites were unknown until former President Donald Trump tweeted a classified image in September 2019. From the image of the exploded rocket launched in Iran, experts were quick to identify the satellite as one of the United States' KH-11 reconnaissance satellites, which for obvious reasons, there is not a lot of known information about it. Now, this man literally posted a classified image on his Twitter, and people still think he didn't hide documents in his bathroom. Yeah, okay. Number 4. Space threats. A document leak from a Discord chat room by Jack Texiera, a member of the Massachusetts Air National Guard, spoke about space threats. The leak comes as the US Space Force enters its 3rd year of operation, and as senior Pentagon leaders sound the alarm over increased threats coming from space. Space Force General Chance Saltzman, the chief of space operations, said the Pentagon is assessing an incredibly sophisticated array of threats that include jamming of communications and GPS satellites, spacecrafts that can grapple other satellites, lasers that can dazzle them, cyber attacks, and even nesting dolls or satellites that release others that spread out and track adversaries' spacecraft. The leaked document showed Russia has also experimented with its Tobel electronic warfare system in an attempt to disrupt SpaceX Starlink satellite system. In its annual Space Threat Assessment Report, the Center for Strategic and International Studies found that China continues to make progress towards the goal of becoming the world leader in space. Over the past year, China has continued to grow its space and counter space assets, maintaining its status as the second most capable space nation after the United States. China has also developed a space station in low Earth orbit, landed a spacecraft on the far side of the moon, and a rover on Mars. It also plans to put astronauts on the moon and is targeting the lunar South Pole, where NASA's Artemis program also intends to send astronauts. China by far has the most dynamic space program of the two US rivals, US officials say. One of the leaked documents say China's overall military strategy to establish and maintain information dominance in conflict drives Beijing's development of space and counter-space doctrine, capabilities, and TTP or tactics, techniques, and procedures. And coming in at number 1 is Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. Among some of the Pentagon's most secretive programs is the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. The program was dedicated to investigate reports of unidentified flying objects, UFOs, but for years it was never formally acknowledged by the Department of Defense. The program was first made public on December 16, 2017. The program began in 2007 with funding of $22 million over 5 years until it ended in 2012. The program began in the US Defense Intelligence Agency, and according to the Department of Defense, the AATIP ended in 2012 after 5 years. However, reporting suggests that the US government programs to investigate UFOs continued. The agency claims they stopped receiving funds in 2012, however, many believe it continues to operate to this day.
Speaking of scandals, and remember this is part 2, so really nothing NASA does at this point should be coming as a surprise to any of us, but once again it seems that they've managed to make the impossible happen. If you've seen part 1, you know that unfortunately many astronauts and cosmonauts have lost their lives either in space or on the ground due to tragic and sometimes avoidable accidents. Well, the very small sliver of a saving grace would have to be that when this happened, at least the families are well taken care of, right? Well, wrong. In fact, you might be just as shocked as I was to learn that all the way up until 2003, astronauts working under NASA had not one shred of life insurance. In fact, in preparation for the Apollo 11 moon landing mission, Neil Armstrong, Edwin, Buzz Aldrin, and the rest of the team actually signed autographs so that their loved ones would have something of value to sell should the astronauts be unable to make it home. Of course, the policies have changed, but the fact that it took NASA until 2003 to do it, not a great look. Okay, for our next point, let's move on to something a bit more positive. While NASA has been known for making some pretty negative faux pas, there's no denying that on the flip side of their downfalls, they have been able to achieve some pretty amazing things. Some things we're aware of, such as the moon landing, the International Space Station, and the Hubble telescope, and some things we've been kept in the dark about. And this one is for my sci-fi fans. In 2015, a document was released revealing that NASA had been working on a very special feat, achieving warp drive technology acceleration beyond the speed of light. Sounds pretty far out there, right? Well, I guess NASA has a far reach, as in April of 2015, a team working on various concepts for spacecraft thruster advancements seems to have accidentally done the impossible when lasers shot through a Renaissance chamber traveled at an accelerated rate of over 300 million meters per second. The speed of light is 299,792,458 meters per second. While this is incredible, the team who achieved this scientific anomaly doesn't actually know how they did it, and so naturally they haven't been able to do it since. Now, I was going to mention black holes, but let's be honest, if you wanted to learn more about those, you'd be watching one of our many other videos specifically dedicated to the subject. Today, we're keeping it fresh, light, and light years away. Well, I'm lying again, because next up we have asteroid 2023 TK15, which passed by Earth at a distance of not light years, but in fact a distance closer to that of our very own moon, making it the closest a space rock of this magnitude has ever been to the surface of Earth. Well, since, you know, the whole dinosaur thing. Too soon? Okay, the passing took place on Friday, October 20th of 2023, and absolutely nothing happened. Well, no, it was an incredible astronomical event that gave both scientists, astronomers, and all asteroid enthusiasts a lot to talk about at dinner parties. And hey, once again, we've survived the end of the world. Starting off our top 3, we have the totally not at all terrifying magnetic explosions. Cool. So I'll put it to you this way. It happens every day, probably multiple times a day, and nothing happens. Well, something does happen, but I'll tell you in a bit. First, let me explain exactly what a magnetic explosion is. So, the Earth is surrounded by a magnetic field, which protects it from all kinds of things, as we discussed earlier, and it's called the magnetosphere. The Sun has something called solar winds, which are basically just a stream of charged particles that flow out from its fiery surface. When the solar winds, which contain their own magnetic energy, push against Earth's magnetic field, they tangle, until eventually they don't. And they come out of it by snapping back and realigning themselves, and that action is what causes the magnetic explosion. Good news, nothing bad happens to us. Great news, something really cool happens. Next up we have the Traveler. Not an alien, again, that's another video, but it is out of this world. And not just out of this world, but out of this solar system. And before it too. The foreign object was discovered on October 19th in 2007 and obviously was something no one had ever seen before. It was originally believed to be a comet, but that was incorrect, as it did not exhibit any behavior that would classify it as such. It was determined to be a space rock that had found its origins in a solar system completely separate from our own, and that had been roaming the cosmos for long before our own system's creation too. Not much else is known about the object, other than it's currently in our solar system, but it does continue to be monitored. Oh, and it has a name too, O Mau Mau, which is a Hawaiian term meaning a messenger from afar arriving first. So what do you think? Is it a sign that the floodgates have opened for objects from outside solar systems to begin encroaching on our own? Let me know. And finally we have Hell Planet. No, not this planet. This planet, also known as exoplanet 55 Cancri E. This planet, which resides 40 light years away outside of our own solar system and hopefully plans on staying there, has a mass of about 8.36 times that of Earth and a diameter of about twice the size. It's pretty big. But wait, there's more, because it's also on fire. And not only that, but it's mostly made up of diamonds. There's a lot going on. The planet is obviously uninhabitable for many reasons, among them being the fact that this planet's temperatures range from anywhere between 4,200 degrees to 2,400 degrees Fahrenheit, 1,400 to 1,300 degrees Celsius. The highest temperatures are reached on the side of the planet which exists in perpetual daylight due to the way the planet orbits around its sun, but even the lowest temperatures which occur on its dark side are still unfathomably hot. Starting us off today, we are diving headfirst into a pretty messed up cover-up that took place back in 1986. You guys might remember me briefly mentioning the Challenger incident in part 1 while discussing the Columbia disaster, but today I wanted to dig a little bit deeper. On January 28th of 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger was all ready to go, manned by 7 astronauts including Krista McAuliffe, who had joined the mission as part of a Teachers in Space project, with the hopes of streaming educational lessons from space in the interest of resparking children's love of learning. Everyone stood and stared as the historic spacecraft left the ground, but no more than 75 seconds after takeoff, the spacecraft exploded and disintegrated 46,000 feet above the Atlantic Ocean, ending the lives of all 7 members on board. After the incident, NASA released an initial report saying that while they were unsure of what caused the accident, the cabin crew had most certainly been unconscious at the time of the explosion due to the cabin's pressure. Unfortunately for the astronauts, this initial report was later proved to be no more than a cover-up attempt, as it was later revealed that the crew were most likely fully awake and possibly fully aware of the fact that the explosion was about to take place as well. Furthermore, the Rogers Commission also outed NASA, revealing that the space agency had not taken proper safety precautions prior to the mission and even failed to receive an engineer's stamp of approval declaring the spacecraft flight ready. Next on our list today, we have the somewhat unorthodox procedures NASA coaches its astronauts to use should an individual experience some kind of mental break while in space, commonly referred to as space madness. When an astronaut or cosmonaut begins to act up during a mission or stay on the ISS, other astronauts on board are instructed to immobilize and bind the hands and feet with duct tape and then tie the affected down with a bungee cord and inject them with a tranquilizer so that no harm may come to the spacecraft or anyone on board. It might seem pretty extreme, but these precautions are also super necessary as even small injuries can become a pretty big deal in space. Plus, if an unhinged astronaut decided to mess with the ship's oxygen systems or open one of the pressure-controlled airtight hatches, they would end up killing everyone on board almost instantly, causing millions of dollars in damage and further damaging NASA's already fairly fragile reputation. While astronauts are highly vetted and their mental state repeatedly evaluated before ever stepping foot outside of our atmosphere, many mental health problems faced by returning astronauts are what pushed the space agency to create the plan of action, just in case such an incident were to occur up in the sky. Next on our list, we have the Space Strike, an incident that occurred in 1973 in which 3 astronauts held over $22 million worth of equipment hostage aboard the Skylab, valued at $2.2 billion US. After NASA refused to acknowledge their overworked employees' cries to implement a more sustainable work schedule. While all 3 of the men aboard the craft were first-time astronauts, the rigorous schedule that barely left time for bathroom breaks would most definitely take its toll on even the most experienced of spacefarers. On the 12-week, 84-day mission, every member of the crew was expected to work 16-hour days every day until they were scheduled to return to Earth. A radio message sent down to Mission Control by astronaut Gerald Carr stated that we would never work 16 hours a day for 84 days straight on the ground, and we should not be expected to do it here in space. In another message, Carr urged his superiors at the agency to allow the crew time to rest and get their minds and bodies under control. To this, Mission Control responded, telling the crew to continue working as instructed, which apparently was the last straw for the astronauts of Skylab 4, who, upon receiving the message from the ground, turned off all communication aboard the spacecraft. The radio silence lasted a full day, during which the astronauts took time to rest and work on mission projects of interest. When communication between the astronauts and the ground resumed, it seems NASA was in much more of a listening mood, and negotiations began to ensure both the needs of the mission and the astronauts would be met for the remainder of the men's time in space. And of course, at our halfway point, we're gonna keep things light today and talk a little bit about a topic that is so overplayed, but also never really gets old, and that is aliens. More specifically, aliens on Mars. Now, we're gonna have to take this one with a grain of salt, but do me a favor and try your best to keep an open mind. In 2014, Jackie, a woman who claimed to have worked on the Mars rover project in 1979, came forward to share her story. She told the public that while monitoring the rover's live video feed, she noticed 2 humanoid figures in what appeared to be spacesuits approach the camera. She ran to tell her bosses and then went to return to her station, but it seems she'd been locked out of her room and the whole thing was covered up by the agency. While the figures were originally thought to be aliens, now many conspiracy theorists believe that perhaps what she uncovered was not extraterrestrial life forms, but rather a secret manned mission to Mars. And again, I'll let you guys decide the answer to this one. Alright, next up we have the James Webb Space Telescope, a $10 billion piece of highly advanced technological equipment sent into space on December 25th of 2021. If you think the Hubble is cool, you're gonna go crazy for this guy because the James Webb Space Telescope was actually designed to capture images too far and too faint for the Hubble, making it quite possibly the most advanced telescope in existence to date. In fact, it has been reported by scientists at NASA that using the James Webb, they were actually able to see the edge of our universe, a previously unreachable feat. I really can't decide if that's terrifying or amazing, so I'm gonna go with both. Because of the incredible reach of the telescope and its ability to capture clear images even at a wildly far distance, many people believe that its quest for deep space discoveries has been used as a cover-up for the fact that the United States government has been using the NASA-made Marvel to spy on the people of Earth and gather intel again on foreign governments. I mean, it's totally possible, but I think they have the Boeing for that, right? Okay, next on the list we have another pretty big embarrassment for the space agency. You know, the space agency that is said to be at the forefront of global technological advances. The agency employing some of America's top scientists, physicists, and engineers. Well, you'd think that based on NASA's roster, they'd have little to no problem when it came to keeping their systems secure and their secrets safe from outsider access, but, you know, NASA has actually been hacked a number of times, believe it or not, perhaps the most famous incident taking place in 1999, when James, at just 15 years of age, hacked into the agency's databases and obtained incredibly sensitive information, including source codes and proprietary software worth millions of dollars. In 2000, James came under the investigation of the FBI, but it wasn't until 2007 that he was arrested for his crimes, which included stealing stealing data from NASA defense contractors. James, however, was never convicted of his crimes, as in 2008, after almost a full year of strenuous legal battles, it was reported that he took his own life in an attempt to escape prosecution. The legitimacy of James's death, however, was called into question by many members of the public who wondered if it really was the young man's decision to end his own life, or if perhaps there was something much more sinister at play. Maybe a cover-up attempt by the government or NASA, fearing what might come to light should the case continue. Starting off our top 3 today, we have the incredibly elusive series of NASA missions to Africa. These strange occurrences came to light after NASA aircrafts were spotted touching down on an American airstrip located in eastern Africa. When the agency was questioned about its presence in the foreign country, they had originally declined to comment. It wasn't until after the public began speculating their arrival in Africa to be in regards to military activity, anti-terror efforts, ground relief, and war preparation that NASA came forward with a statement, claiming that their reasoning for landing in Africa was to conduct ground observations that would allow scientists to better understand biodiversity in the area. Okay, but if that's true, why didn't they just say that in the first place? I don't know, you guys, something seemed off here, but as always, let me know what you think. And finally on our list today, we have NASA's solar competition. Solar power competition, that is. NASA became pretty sheepish when a number of reports were released stating that far ahead of them in the pursuit of a large-scale solar energy source is none other than China. Furthermore, it appears that not only is China ahead of NASA when it comes to sun-powered renewable energy, but they are actually at the forefront of solar energy development as a whole. Solar panels created by scientists in China are said to be some of the best in the world, collecting energy 24 hours a day, all year long. And China also has the largest solar farm in the world, which is so immense it can actually be seen from space. On top of all of this, the country has recently revealed plans to launch a commercial-scale solar-powered station in orbit by the year 2050, allowing them to directly harness the sun's energy from space and far surpass NASA's solar abilities to date. Next, at our halfway point today, we have the Apollo 1 fire, which occurred on January 27th in 1967 and is forever earmarked as the first of many incredibly dark days in NASA's controversial history. The fire took place during a pre-flight test for the spacecraft, during which a flash fire broke out inside the command module, likely sparked by an electrical short that took place under one of 3 astronaut on board's footrests. The capsule in which Gus Grissom, Edward White, and Roger Chafe were seated in excited anticipation was filled with pure oxygen, making the environment highly combustible. When the module sparked, the area was engulfed in flames, and due to the nature of the exits, the 3 men were unfortunately unable to escape and passed inside the ship, leading to the extreme government scrutiny of the space agency, along with public outrage and demands for significant design and engineering modifications in regards to safety. Next on our list, we have the incredibly imbecilic incident in which a simple mistake caused $193.1 million and countless hours of work spent on an orbital satellite to go quickly, swiftly, and embarrassingly down the drain. The incident occurred in 1993 when NASA, in partnership with Lockheed Martin Astronautics, designed and built the Mars Climate Orbiter, a 338-kilogram robotic spacecraft designed to investigate climate on Mars by collecting data from the planet's surface and atmosphere. Now here's where things get dumb. The mission was a complete failure due to nothing other than the fact that the engineers working at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory used the metric system of meters and millimeters, while at the Lockheed Institute they used feet, inches, and pounds. Because of this, the orbiter's measurements were way off, and upon arrival at Mars, which I'm surprised it even made it to, the spacecraft became too close to the planet's atmosphere, which caused it to burn up and completely disintegrate. I mean, I know it's rocket science, but come on, guys. Next up, we have another great example of how NASA essentially just bleeds money because of the most basic mistakes. In this case, an extra $50 million had to be spent fixing an error made on a mirror attached to the Hubble Space Telescope after they had already spent almost $1.5 billion to build it, and after they'd already sent it into space. The issue was brought to light when the incredibly advanced telescope telescope designed to capture high-quality images of distant stars and galaxies was sending back blurry ones that looked more like they had been taken with an old Nokia than a $1.5 billion piece of space equipment. It was quickly determined that the reason for these lackluster images was a manufacturing error, which had produced one of the telescope's light-reflecting mirrors incorrectly. A simple miscalculation had led to the curve of the mirror being completely incompatible with the rest of the telescope. In order to fix this very expensive mistake, a correction team was sent to the telescope where they installed a series of small mirrors designed to correct the flaws in the original. Luckily, the mission was a complete success, and since then the Space Telescope has become one of the most precise and productive observatories in our planet's history. Next up, we have an incident involving a love triangle between astronauts William, Lisa, and Colleen, which resulted in some pretty erratic on-the-ground behavior. Remember when I mentioned that the come down from space is sometimes much more than just a descent back into our atmosphere? Well, it seems that was definitely the case for Lisa Nowak after sparking up and burning down a very short-lived relationship with William during her 2006 space mission. After the two made it home safe, they went through a hostile parting of ways, and Williams was quick to re-enter the dating scene, moving on to yet another woman in uniform, Air Force Captain Colleen Shipman. When Lisa found out about Williams' new woman, she decided to confront her, driving 900 miles across the country from Houston to Orlando, wearing adult diapers so that no time would be wasted on frivolous pit stops along the way. When Lisa arrived at her destination, she pepper sprayed Colleen before being arrested. Lisa was later charged with attempting to end Colleen's life, as well as attempted abduction. While the disgraced and scorned lover maintains that she had only wanted to intimidate Colleen, the contents of her vehicle, which included latex gloves, rubber tubing, a hammer, a butcher's blade, a serrated buck blade, and many large plastic bags, told otherwise. Unfortunately for a very frightened Colleen, the evidence didn't stick, and Lisa was only sentenced to 2 days in jail and a year of probation after pleading guilty to felony burglary and a misdemeanor. We're gonna lighten things up at our halfway point today. Well, kind of. Actually, this isn't really light, it's kind of disgusting, but I guess that's what we're here for. In part 1 of this mini-series, we discussed how astronauts survive in space drinking their own pee, and that was very gross. Well, I'm gonna take it a step further and fill you in on some new scientific advancements being made that will allow astronauts to consume what I morally cannot refer to as food, created by processing their own feces. That's right, this is really happening, and somehow it's my job to share it with you. Before you decide to click away, allow me to clarify something right off the bat. No, astronauts will not be directly consuming their solid waste, but rather the astronauts' food will be consuming the methane produced by the astronauts' feces instead. You see, scientists have recently discovered a number of bacteria species that can be grown into edible and nutritious substances. But in order for the bacteria to reach this state, methane must be introduced into its airtight environment. Methane, which is not so easily sourced in space. And so naturally, scientists thought, hey, here's an idea, and whipped up a waste processor that can turn shite into methane diamonds in just 13 hours flat. Nice. Alright, let's move on. You know what's not great for NASA's reputation? Having their astronauts accused of sabotaging their Russian counterparts while aboard the ISS. Like, it's really bad. The incident took place in 2018 after NASA's ground control had detected significant changes in the air pressure on the ISS, which was then traced back to a 2mm wide drill hole in Russia's Soyuz spacecraft docked on the ISS. Successful efforts were quickly made to seal the hole, clearly made by an electrical tool, but of course Russia's space agency was not happy, and even threatened legal action against Serena Chancellor, who they accused of creating the breach. In the end, nothing came of the lawsuit and the cause of the hole was never determined, but with growing animosity between the US and Russian space agencies, along with the aging of the ISS, it is quite possible and highly likely that we will see Russia slowly phasing out its involvement with the space station and perhaps abandoning the project completely by as early as 2025. Next up, we have yet another PR nightmare that occurred when Harriet, former wife of Apollo 7 command pilot Dawn, filed for divorce. That day, Dawn made history twice, being not only one of the first members to make it into space after the Apollo 1 disaster, but also the first person to ever be served divorce papers while in space. While NASA has had its fair share of hound dog astronauts enjoying the company of multiple companions at one time, Dawn made headlines after his wife finally decided she'd had enough of the spaceman's infidelity on Earth. According to reports, when Harriet had first confronted Don about his extramarital activities, he responded saying that she was crazy. Harriet's rebuttal? Visit a psychiatrist. But Don pleaded with her, saying that if she did that, he would surely lose his job. And so, in 1968, she saw a lawyer instead and initiated the divorce, while her husband orbited around the Earth for just shy of 11 days. This next one is for my extraterrestrial enthusiasts. Don't worry, I didn't forget about you guys. Every NASA video needs at least one point that backs public claims that NASA is not only actively aware of, but is also actively hiding the presence of UFOs, UAPs, and even aliens. So for today's list, we're going to be looking at NASA's track record of cutting the video feed on live streams captured on a webcam attached to the ISS. While they have been known to have done this on multiple occasions, one instance occurring on July 9th of 2016 has garnered much popularity amongst the extraterrestrial enthusiast community. During the live stream, a bright object became clearly visible, floating into view, and then sitting still in the top right-hand corner of the screen. Moments later, before any real observations could be made, the screen flashed a standardized message claiming that the service was experiencing technical difficulties. While that might well have been the case, the timing, along with the fact that this has happened before, definitely raised some suspicion. So let me know what you guys think. Was it really a technical difficulty, or is NASA once again keeping secrets? Next up, we have 19 years of fraudulent business that led to many malfunctions, including the failed launches of NASA's Orbiting Carbon Observatory and both the 2009 and 2011 Glory missions. Along with these failures, millions of dollars were sent right down the drain, all due to faulty aluminum that had been supplied to the company by Safa Profiles Inc., now Hydro Extrusions Portland Inc., for 19 years before the material's integrity was called into question. It eventually came to light that the company had falsified thousands of documents pertaining to the materials, changing test results and providing clients with misleading certifications. Along with being held liable for $42 million worth of damage during the 19 years in which they participated in fraudulent business practices, Safa was hit with criminal and was even suspended from doing business with the United States government from 2015 all the way to 2019 when the company came under new management. And finally, to finish this off today, we have the Cosmic Souvenir Scandal, which took place in July of 1971. Before setting off on the Apollo 15 mission, astronauts David Scott, Alfred Worden, and James Irwin made a deal with a German stamp dealer that in exchange for $7,000 each, the three men would bring 100 envelopes each with stamps and postmarks to the lunar surface of the moon, so that they may later be sold for a profit. The men agreed under the condition that the postal covers not be sold until after the Apollo missions had ended. In fact, they even brought extra covers to keep for themselves as well. In total, somewhere between 400 to 600 envelopes were brought along on the mission. When the men returned to Earth and handed over the stamp dealer's share of the envelopes, he went immediately back on his word to wait for the missions to end and began selling the memorabilia straight away. Some of the postcards even sold for thousands of dollars that year. And mind you, this was all the way back in the early 1970s, so $1,000 back then would be worth over $7,500 today. Eventually, NASA found out what the men had done and that they had failed to declare the envelopes in their mission log. It was determined that while the astronauts had violated regulations, there was no evidence of any real criminal intent, but they were severely reprimanded and punished, with NASA removing all three men from flight status for any future missions with the agency. A couple hundred postcards at the cost of never being able to set foot in space again? I don't know, you guys. Do you think it was worth it?
Number 10. Low gravity doesn't affect your bones and muscles. We know that humans do just fine in Earth's gravity. On the other hand, we know that human bones and muscles can atrophy terribly in zero gravity, as seen in experiments on the International Space Station. Astronauts on the ISS have to exercise for 2 hours a day to prevent muscle loss, but their bones still lose calcium over time, and they don't recover until they come back to Earth. Adding to this, we don't know how the human body will react on Mars, where gravity is only about 0.38 the strength of Earth. Many people have long assumed that humans can survive just fine in Martian gravity. It'll be just like Earth, only we can jump a little higher, but we don't actually know this for a fact. It might turn out that low Martian gravity is just as bad for human health as zero gravity. Mars's low gravity may also erode other capabilities that are crucial for for everyday functioning. For instance, NASA has found that eyesight can mysteriously deteriorate in zero gravity. Astronaut John Phillips went from a perfect 20/20 to 2100 after just 6 months aboard the ISS. Astronauts also find it harder to sleep in zero gravity, and many passengers in space suffer from insomnia. Number 9. Space Shuttle Challenger astronauts died instantly. On January 28, 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger broke apart 73 seconds into its flight and ended the lives of all 7 crew members instantly. The spacecraft disintegrated 46,000 feet above the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Cape Canaveral, Florida at 11:39 a.m. It was the first fatal accident involving an American spacecraft in flight. It was thought that all the astronauts passed away instantly, but it was revealed decades later that some, if not all of the astronauts survived the initial explosion, as the cockpit cabin had enough protection to not be breached. For 2 minutes and 45 seconds, they were awake and aware as they plummeted towards the Atlantic Ocean, which is terrifying. Understandably, NASA knew that the news of their terrifying death would have crippled the space program even more than it already was, so they kept this a secret. I'm gonna be honest, I do understand the reasoning for this, but it's just sad. Number 8. The sun is a big ball of fire. Okay, so this isn't all NASA's fault, but despite what you've been led to believe, the sun is not a ball of fire. There isn't any fire in the sun. Fire requires oxygen, and the sun is composed mostly of helium and hydrogen. In fact, the heat from the sun comes from something called nuclear fusion. The pressure and temperature in the sun's core causes the hydrogen atoms to fuse together into helium atoms. This process gives off the intense heat and light of the sun. People, including scientists, sometimes say that the sun burns hydrogen to make it glow, but that is just a figure of speech. Hydrogen really doesn't burn, it fuses into helium. Also, the sun itself is white, which means it contains all the colors in the visible spectrum. The sun appears orangish yellow because of the blue light it emits has a shorter wavelength and is scattered in the atmosphere, which is the same process that makes the sky appear blue.
Next on the list, we have a devastating tragedy that resulted in the deaths of 7 individuals and a 29-month suspension of the NASA Space Shuttle program and a serious reevaluation of procedures. The event took place on February 1st of 2003 after Space Shuttle Columbia had been sent to the Hubble so that its team could perform yet another servicing of the telescope, in this case replacing an aging power control unit, removing and installing solar arrays, and conducting instrumental upgrades. The mission seemed like a success until Columbia began its re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere, during which the Space Shuttle disintegrated, ending the lives of all 7 astronauts aboard the ship. Another tragic day in NASA's history that holds many similarities to a previous disaster that took place just 17 years prior, in which the 7 astronauts of the Challenger met a similar fate shortly after takeoff. The shuttle disintegrated in an explosion, most likely caused by a failed O-ring seal on one of the solid rocket boosters. While the news of these kind of accidents are definitely not something NASA as a company wants to be making headlines, it's incredibly important that the public have access to this information so that we're able to push for more extensive testing of spacecrafts and much better safety precautions on future expeditions. Okay, you guys, for these last 2 points, we're gonna air out the room a little bit and do a complete 180 because I want to leave you on a high note. So starting off our top 2 today, we have the fact that astronauts actually drink their own pee. No, I'm not making this up. I suppose when you are sitting some 250 miles away from the nearest oceans or streams, liquids tend to be in short supply. So naturally, NASA figured out a way to recycle urine into fresh drinking water for the cosmonauts and astronauts aboard the ISS, the International Space Station. If you're drinking lemonade right now, you might want to put it down as I explain this next part. The ISS residents' urine is distilled through a process called the urine processor assembly, in which vacuum distillation is used to gather the water from the waste, leaving behind something called urine brine. I actually cannot believe my job has me talking about fractionated pee right now, but hey, all in the name of entertainment, right? I'd cheers to that, but not right now. And finally, for our last point today, we have something that might just be more out there than our last point, if that's even possible. I don't know, I'll leave it up to you. How do I phrase this? Have you ever wanted to do it on the moon? Well, if you have, you'll probably think this next guy is a complete legend, because while he didn't actually do it on the astronomical body of the moon, Thad Roberts certainly had an astronomical experience with a body on 600 pounds of moon rocks that he had stolen from the NASA Space Agency. 600 pounds of moon rocks valued at $21 million, by the way. That's like committing grand larceny 4,200 times and then doing it on the loot. The worst part of all this is that the moon rocks were supposed to be studied by scientists, but it seems his specimen ruined their specimen. Roberts was charged and convicted for his crimes, sentenced to 100 months, 8 years in federal prison. Upon release, Roberts promised to keep his hands and other things off of the space agency's important artifacts, but he also made a point to say that he in no way regretted his actions.